Hello and welcome to Star Wars Fits. Before we begin, please subscribe to my channel and give a like and share. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Yuuzhan Vong. The Yuuzhan Vong, children of the Yuuzhan, also called the Chosen Race, known to the Chiss and Virons as the Far Outsiders, sometimes incorrectly abbreviated to Vong, which implied that one was disowned by their family and their gods, were a nomadic, extragalactic, sentient species that nearly destroyed the New Republic and were responsible for the deaths of nearly 300 trillion sentient beings during their invasion of the galaxy. The Yuuzhan Vong and their Chisrach slaves were among the few alien species known to originate outside the galaxy, the only others being the Silentuum and the Abon Minor. A typical Yuuzhan Vong resembles a human in form, though they are taller and heavier than the average human and less hair on their heads. The Yuuzhan Vong were religious zealots who viewed mechanical technology as blasphemy. Their technological innovations were genetically engineered and purely organic. Additionally, the Yuuzhan Vong deeply respected pain to the point of masochism and strove to improve their physical capabilities through organ grafting. Such grafting was a status symbol within the Yuuzhan Vong society. Perhaps most notably, the Yuuzhan Vong were unable to be sensed through the Force. This confounded the Jedi who first encountered the Yuuzhan Vong. However, they were susceptible to some Force-based attacks. The Yuuzhan Vong was tall, muscular, and human-like, but his face and body were horribly scarred and disfigured. He had no hair, and his nose was practically missing. He was horrible to behold. The Yuuzhan Vong were a humanized species, initially leading some to believe that they were a human offshoot race, but there were differences between the humans and Yuuzhan Vong. For example, the Yuuzhan Vong typically lacked kidneys. The Yuuzhan Vong were also much taller and had heavier bills than the average human, though this could be a result of selective breeding. Yuuzhan Vong also had a longer lifespan than the average human, generally around 3 times that of a human's. Genetically, they shared many elements that made them similar to humans, which was considered unusual, as they were an extragalactic species, but one notable difference was one element of their genetic structure that was present in all their biotechnology. The Yuuzhan Vong had sloping, almost rigid-like foreheads. Several Yuuzhan Vong had been seen with pointed ears, while just as many had been seen without them. These could have been ritual mutilations or a genetic variation. There is no conclusive evidence as to what the species norm was. Yuuzhan Vong also had short, stubbed nose, making their faces appear skull-like. The Yuuzhan Vong usually had black hair, though in lesser amounts on both the head and body than humans, but often wore a much larger than them. In many cases, they were also completely bald. Some blue sacs could be found under the eyes of the Yuuzhan Vong. They were often considered a mark of beauty. These sacs expanded and contracted to reflect a Yuuzhan Vong's mood, as the species did not use the facial expressions preferred by humans. Through the blue sacs under their eyes, they were capable of telling if an individual was in delight or were suffering from rage. The most common skin tone among the Yuuzhan Vong was grey, with the second most common being yellow. Other major characteristics was their jet black blood. The Yuuzhan Vong nervous system was very conductive, as if it were made specifically for feeling pain. This nervous system was noted as containing aspects that were not found in humans, and likewise there are elements within a human nervous system that were not found in a Yuuzhan Vong. It was also noted that their tissue was very different from a human's, which made the use of the Yuuzhan Vong qua cells difficult on them, as the human brain eventually rejected the cells. Perhaps most notably, most objectionable trait of the Yuuzhan Vong was that they were outside of the Force as the Jedi knew it. They had no Force presence that could be sensed, and were unaffected by most Force powers that were trained directly at them. This meant that they attempt to seize their motivation, truthfulness, or determine their next course of action were futile, although it may mean that one was capable of detecting them by reaching out in the Force and determining if the person had no presence within it. Even a normally powered telekinetic blast that was capable of launching an ordinary opponent off their feet at high speed simply caused the Yuuzhan Vong either to stumble or to lose balance temporarily. While it is not possible to affect the Yuuzhan Vong directly through the use of the Force, it was possible to use indirect means to accomplish such a task, such as manipulating an object through telekinesis and throwing it at a Yuuzhan Vong, which would injure them, or by controlling the air in an attempt to increase the pressure, thus allowing a Jedi to in effect crush the Yuuzhan Vong. The only known Force techniques that seem somehow exempt from this limitation were variations on Force Lightning and the Sith technique Force Net. A small number of Jedi developed another ability, the Vong Sense. In some ways, this ability worked similarly to the Force, but only related to the Yuuzhan Vong and their bios. Yuuzhan Vong culture was centered around sacrifice and their gods. Although warriors in particular were centered on the philosophy of pain, they tended to glorify pain, not as a motive for action, but rather as a state of living. This was because they believed that, just like their gods have sacrificed their bodies to create the galaxy, the Yuuzhan Vong themselves were to sacrifice parts of their body for a greater purpose. As such, they believed that by remaking their own bodies, they were becoming closer to their deities. While this was the case, they never maimed their bodies in a manner that would permanently hinder their ability to function. This resulted in individual Yuuzhan Vong having molting or scarring and sweeping tattoos. The more elite individuals were even known to graft organs from other creatures into their bodies. Devotional practices to the gods called for bloodletting at prayer times. Shamed ones were forbidden from attending their religious ceremonies. As the Yuuzhan Vong grew more successful in their life, they began the process of sacrificing body parts and replacing them with organs from another creature, thus enhancing their abilities. This was done so during the escalator ceremony, where an engineered organism related to the implanter began to make cuts and incisions and place the implants. At times the implant was accepted into the body and the Yuuzhan Vong was promoted to a higher rank. However, there were occasions where the implant failed to be accepted on the body. This resulted either in death or the individual becoming a derided, shamed one. Such failures were believed to have been the work of the Yuuzhan Vong gods, though there were times that such a happenstance was due to the failure of the shaper in charge of the escalation ceremony. Family was noted as being a strong element in their society. A member of the Yuuzhan Vong was typically associated with a family group, known typically as a domain. Some domains were more powerful than others. In addition to this family structure, the Yuuzhan Vong also employed a caste-based system, which included respective castes for warriors, shapers, priests, intendants, and workers. Love affairs between two different castes were considered forbidden. In fact, domain loyalties ran deep and went far beyond simple likes or dislikes. They were a series of ritual statements that a Yuuzhan Vong was required to utter as part of a protocol from a member of the lower ranks to a member of the higher rank. While this was the case, members of one caste were not obligated to salute a superior from another caste, which was the case with intendants to higher-ranking members of the warrior caste. The Yuuzhan Vong children were raised in caste-specific creches by designated caretakers, and likely did not know their biological parents until they were older. The creche parents named them. Deformed children were killed at birth, but if the deformity was mild enough, as was the case with one Una Sai, the child was spared. A useful survival trait for these children in order to live through such a harsh and competitive environment was paranoia. Twin births were uncommon events. Only a handful of cases were known to the New Republic, in which each was thought to be a portent of a great event. In each case, one twin killed the other as a prelude to a great destiny. Funeral processions were typically carried out in a way that did not preserve the dead, and Yuuzhan Vong mortuaries often consisted of Yuuzhan Vong mourners who met with assigned priests. During such conditions, priests were involved in removing various body parts of the dead in order to dedicate them to the various gods. According to the insight of an imperial officer, the Empire and the Yuuzhan Vong had some elements that were common to one another. These include a need for strict discipline and the obedience to one's superior officer. However, at the time of the invasion, it was believed that their ultimate goals were completely different, with the Yuuzhan Vong desiring to change the way of life of the inhabitants of the galaxy. One of their goals was the destruction and removal of all forms of manufactured technology, which was one of the key strengths of the imperial remnant. This great belief is discipline and obedience in one's superiors meant that the subordinates never contradicted their leaders. They were capable of subverting or altering the will of their commanders, but did not point out errors in that will. They were ultimately highly skilled warriors who never retreated in the face of defeat, as they feared this would insult their gods. While this was largely the case, it was known that certain Yuuzhan Vong were capable of cowardly actions. For actions like this, they became shamed ones. Yuuzhan Vong beliefs highly influenced their actions and personality. According to their religion, life was suffering, and death was the ultimate release from that suffering. As such, the Yuuzhan Vong felt that nothing could be learned unless it was purchased in pain, and were resigned to and willingly went to their deaths. Some amongst their race, such as Domain Shai, went as far as to inflict pain on themselves to the point that they enjoyed it. Such groups felt that the infliction of pain was a means of earning the favor of their deities. Furthermore, it was believed that the greatest glory was death in battle. This fixation on death varied depending on the circumstances, as dying in the cold void between galaxies was considered a disgraceful death. Consequently, this meant that most Yuuzhan Vong fought to the death, and thus also meant that other empires had their few opportunities of exploring the extragalactic aliens or organic warships. In addition, the priests claimed that they did not ask of others what they themselves did not accomplish, meaning that they equally sacrificed their own numbers as well as infidels. This was an act of service to their deities, who were believed to have sacrificed their body parts in order to create all of existence. The species also greatly believed in honor, with that subject ranking quite high in the beliefs of certain members of the race. Even under interrogations, the word of a Yuuzhan Vong was high, and if they promised respite to their victims for revealing information, they typically kept their word. In one case, a Yuuzhan Vong commander agreed to a personal duel over the fate of a planet, and, if defeated, he agreed that his forces would spare the world. While Yuuzhan Vong himself was sincere, his subordinates worked with the War Master to subvert that honorable combat. Furthermore, the denial of the right to honorable combat was seen as a disrespectful act, worthy of scorn from the warrior caste. In fact, warriors would even consider a single worthy opponent of fighting a single Yuuzhan Vong warrior at a time worthy of respect in regard to their bravery as well as their fighting skills. There also existed a similar concept to the Wookiee life debt, which was known as Us Hork. This was a display that showed eternal gratitude and loyalty to another for something they had done. This meant that the Yuuzhan Vong in question could fight to the death on that person's behalf. In regards to food, the Yuuzhan Vong held no great joy of eating, and thus felt indifferent about gastronomic tastes. The only exception of this was if the enjoyment came from an event such as the slaying of a great beast during a ritual. The psychology of the Yuuzhan Vong during wartime engagements was based around attack and involved the use of high levels of aggression. This made them dangerous. Though at times their actions were somewhat predictable, the Yuuzhan Vong were often encouraged by an enemy's resistance to them and tended to see such foes as being worthy of fighting. Eternally, the Yuuzhan Vong greatly believed in the concept of competition as means of breeding strength. However, this had the side effect of being about internal feuds between domains and castes, who would attempt to escalate their positions above their kin. This resulted in civil war in the past, and it was believed that invasion would allow the Yuuzhan Vong to external enemy to fight, but after some time the same divisions began to appear once more. He also believed deeply in the concept of revenge and had no reservations to the use of aggressive emotions, unlike the Jedi. This often meant that the Yuuzhan Vong engaged in suicide attacks or ritual suicides when forced to defeat in order to attain glory, such as a source of pride of the warrior caste. This aggressive and warlike nature meant that they did not have any concept of peace or remorse. In their language, peace meant the willing submission to a conqueror. Furthermore, within their society, the use of profanities meant that the individual in question was capable of calling out a blood challenge to his opponent. The two would fight in the battle to the death. In addition, the use of particular insulting words such as calling the other a fool meant that the wounded party was perfectly within their rights, even expected by their comrades, to kill their opponent. This meant that an attack on the Yuuzhan Vong's pride was the grounds for demanding satisfaction, which was also capable of being accepted as a sacrifice to their gods. Yuuzhan Vong had a fanatical hatred of machines, believing them to be abominations and an affront to their gods. According to their beliefs at the time of the invasion, they believed that combustion, the creation of fire through a machine, was the first abomination. This was because the Yuuzhan Vong believed deeply in life, but also felt that all life ended, as in the wild. One type of life form was eaten by another, who in turn was devoured by another predator until it died. which replenished the ecosystem. This meant that death was prevalent constantly, but allowed new life to grow while machines did not die, meaning that they were capable of replacing organic life, which was something the Yuuzhan Vong would never allow. The species possessed a saying, "Let the enemy fight," which was one of the aspects of their racial psychology. They often expected combat and arranged ambushes for their enemies, after which they baited targets into their traps. Their interdiction forces often remained outside their designated routes in order to jump onto a target, thus trapping them as a type of ambush. Another saying included, "A fleet that fights 2 battles loses twice." Ultimately, the Yuuzhan Vong's earlier relations with other races was based on domination of the lesser species, as they felt most other races were unworthy. Those that managed to impress the Yuuzhan Vong were considered worthy, were often provided a clean death, while others were relegated to slavery. Despite their elements of their society which were seen as being barbaric, the Yuuzhan Vong truly revered life in all its forms. Among the few infidel races of the Promised Land, they tended to favor the Houdin, whose natural senses meant that they did not like the presence of advanced technology. Some primitive races who did not make use of technology were also known to have willingly allied with the Yuuzhan Vong, such as some of the inhabitants of Wayland. These wish-to-bes believed that the Yuuzhan Vong were like them in that they respected life, while the majority believed that this was not true, as the Kupo people simply wished to harm as well as twist things to suit their needs. According to their religion, they had to prove themselves worthy creations of their deities, and if they did not do so, they would be destroyed, after which they would be replaced by a more worthy species. Their belief stated that this had happened 3 times in their religion, which a new species created, eventually leading to the gods creating the Yuuzhan Vong. In the post-war period, the Yuuzhan Vong became a deeply spiritual as well as introspective people. Many felt that they would never be able to mend relations with the inhabitants of the galaxy due to the Yuuzhan Vong War, though a few heroic members of this race believed that they needed to evolve in order to survive. Thus they felt that the journey to better relations was one that was worth the effort. They still retained their different form of honor in this age, with both custom and ritual still being an important aspect of their culture. The Yuuzhan Vong functioned in a caste system. This ranged from the powerful one-person supreme overlord to the lowly, oppressive worker caste. The political system of the Yuuzhan Vong was a theocracy, with the supreme overlord deriving his authority directly from his status as the voice of Yun Yuuzhan. By the time of Darth Krayt's Sith Empire, the caste-based system was still present, and with warriors and shapers included. During the Yuuzhan Vong's invasion of the galaxy, the supreme overlord was Shimra Yemeni, or so it was believed, as he was secretly being controlled by Unimi. Only the supreme overlord had direct communication with Yun Yuuzhan, the supreme god and creator of the Yuuzhan Vong. Shapers were scientists who supervised the biotechnology of the Yuuzhan Vong. They focused on the creation and development of their organic technology, and together with the priests observed the arcane developments related to it. Shapers were typically described as shorter than the average Yuuzhan Vong and were notable for their intrinsic tendril headdresses and shaper hands. A master shaper's hand had 8 fingers, while that of of an adept had only 5. Each finger contained a different tool used in their work. Some shapers, like Yuuzhan Vong and Nim Yim, hid weapons in their shapers' hands. Their headdresses appeared to have tied directly to their nervous system and were used for ceremonial purposes to represent genuflection or compliance. They could also change shape to show their wearer's mood. The shapers ranked very highly in Yuuzhan Vong society, and their ranks included the Master Shaper, Shaper Adept, and Shaper Initiate, also known as Shaper Novices. The priest caste also considerably powerful in the Yuuzhan Vong's rigidly theocratic society. The members of the priest caste served the many lesser deities and ruled the Yuuzhan Vong. There were several sects, each for the worship of a different Yuuzhan Vong deity. The warrior caste served as the armies of the Yuuzhan Vong and was one of the highest castes, who essentially served as the military branch of their race. Members of the caste were trained from an early age to excel in combat. Warriors were also more aggressive than other Yuuzhan Vong. Notably, members of the caste include Shavonna and Naz Khokha, both of whom became War Master for the Yuuzhan Vong at various points. The chief weapon was the Amstaff, which resembled a deadly serpent capable of spitting venom or coiling around foes. The warriors were devotees of the slayers, Yum Yemka, and sought honor in combat. They wore the living Bundun crab armor, which was capable of resisting blaster fire or lightsabers. This armor did have weak points, such as points at the armpit and areas of the inner hip where the shell segments joined. Ranks of the warrior caste include War Master, Supreme Commander, Commander, Subaltern, and Warrior. The Intendant caste worked to keep Yuuzhan Vong society functioning and was as such responsible for the Yuuzhan Vong economy. They were noted as being the smallest of the castes, who lacked a patron deity or a specific war cry when compared to the others. It was this caste that were in charge of matters of commerce, bureaucracy, trade, and management of the sizable slave workforce employed by the Yuuzhan Vong. Notably, intendants included Num Anar, the deadliest enemy of the Jedi. Members of the intendant caste could come from either the Shaper or Warrior castes. Shimra Jamani was formerly an intendant before becoming Supreme Overlord. They were the government and politicians and favored Yun Harla, the trickster goddess. Ranks of the intendant caste include High Prefect, Prefect, Council, Executor, and Attendant. The worker caste was the largest yet lowest caste and served mainly as servants, slaves, and laborers. The worker caste included shamed ones, Yuuzhan Vong, whose bodies had rejected by organic implants and modifications. Yuuzhan Vong born outright into the worker caste. Yuuzhan Vong who had failed to succeed in other castes and conquered or shaped species such as the Shakrak. Slaves and ashamed ones, fallen members of society, were part of the worker castes, but they were treated with contempt even by their fellow workers, though Yuuzhan Vong born into the worker caste were actually descended from shamed ones. The Yuuzhan Vong religion, called the True Way, was very important to the Yuuzhan Vong. They were devoted and had many gods, and prior to their defeat believed it was their duty to appease their gods' desire through conquest and genocide. Yuuzhan, the creator, was the most powerful deity of the Yuuzhan Vong religion. He sacrificed most of his body parts to create the lesser deities and the Yuuzhan Vong galaxy. Only the Supreme Overlord had direct contact with him. Yun-Harla was the trickster and cloaked goddess and goddess of deception and aggression. Yun-Harla represented the political caste. Having learned this information, the New Republic military had their top pilot, Jania Solo, codenamed Trickster and Goddess, in an act of psychological warfare against the Yuuzhan Vong invaders who would believe they were fighting the living form of one of their most powerful deities. Yum Yamaka was the slayer, the god of war. His image was of a multi-tentacled being, and was the inspiration for the form of the Yammosk. He was primarily worshipped by the warrior caste. He was in actuality created by the priest caste when the Yuuzhan Vong turned to war. Yun Ne-Shiel was a modeler. She oversaw natural life cycles and was worshipped by the Shaper caste. Yun Xing and Yun Hua were the lover gods and twins. Having a relationship outside one's caste was forbidden in Yuuzhan Vong society. Disobeying automatically led to sacrifice to the lover gods. Yun Shuno was the pardoner. She had 1,000 eyes and watched over and spoke for the shamed ones, who were shunned by every other Yuuzhan Vong deity. She was the only deity the shamed ones were allowed to worship. The Yuuzhan Vong were refugees from a distant galaxy. Their original homeworld, Yun Jatar, was a tropical planet that had a large asteroid belt around it. It was destroyed thousands of standard years before they invaded the galaxy. In Yuuzhan Vong, Yuzhantar meant creche of the gods, and the living planet was a template for the Yuuzhan Vong deities. Yuzhantar may have been the basis for Yun Yuuzhan, the creator god of the Yuuzhan Vong. Little is known about their early history, but the Yuuzhan Vong had apparently once lived as symbionts with their homeworld and were force-sensitive. Their technology was also largely organic. At some point in their history, the Yuuzhan Vong were caught in the midst of a devastating galactic conflict between the two droid civilizations, believed to be the Silentium and the Abominor, which solidified their hatred of mechanical technology and xenophobia towards their other sentient life forms. Yuuzhan Vong's living homeworld aided them in the war by bestowing upon them the knowledge of creating living weapons. However, as the war dragged on, the Yuuzhan Vong as a species became increasingly violent and warlike. Eventually they were able to defeat their enemies and force both droid powers to flee their galaxy. Following the war, the Yuuzhan Vong went on a crusade to cleanse their galaxy of all forms of mechanical technology. They conquered much of their galaxy and either exterminated or enslaved conquered species. Among those species they conquered were the reptilian Chakrak, which became slave workers of the Yuuzhan Vong. Much of the galaxy in their hands, the various domains, what Yuuzhan Vong called clans or families, fractured and turned against each other, resulting in devastating Kremlevian war. During the conflict, much of the Yuuzhan Vong's galaxy was destroyed, including their homeworld, Yuzhantar. The exact details of the destruction of the planet were lost to the passages of time. However, Yuzhantar did produce a sea which eventually became Sonama Sekot, later colonized by the Langishi and Pharaohs. Separated from their original symbiosis was their homeworld. The Yuuzhan Vong were stripped from the Force and experienced great pain. Thus the species saw pain as the only way to return to that symbiosis and practiced body modifications on themselves. In the place of their homeworld, the Yuuzhan Vong took up belief in several deities and subsequently governed nearly every aspect of their civilization. The Yuuzhan Vong made the exodus from their galaxy on board their great world ships. Towards the end of the war, Steng emerged as the first War Master. A rival War Master, Yuuzhan, invaded the Yuuzhan's core tactic, which he used to destroy the planet Ixir and its moon. The destruction of the Ixir resulted in the death of Steng and the end of the war. Eventually, Yuuzhan united the domains into a single socio-political entity and became the first supreme overlord of the Yuuzhan Vong. With much of their galaxy ruined, the Yuuzhan Vong began a long trek to another galaxy in search of a new homeworld. For a long period, perhaps centuries, the species was forced to travel through the intergalactic void in massive warships. During this period, the Yuuzhan Vong nearly destroyed themselves. Violence and competition had been inevitable, built into their society, and without an external target, they focused their aggression on each other. Though there were no all-out wars in the magnitude of the Kremlivian War, the domains continued to fight each other for the favor of supreme overlords. When the Yuuzhan Vong left their galaxy, how long their voyage took, or if they even knew what their destination would be, was unknown. At least one account spoke of the journey taking at least several millennia. However, by 26 ABY, one of the oldest world ships, old enough to be dying and considered to be ancient, was less than 1,000 years old. It would appear that by 3997 BBY, sometime after Isiar Khon became the new Dark Lord of the Sith, the Patriot Vong's Silivith probe creatures had arrived, and as of 3963 BBY, at least one scout had reached the wild space region of the known galaxy. In that year, a group of Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders under the command of Canderous Ordo encountered what would later come to be known as the Yorick Stronha, disguised as an asteroid in the Crispin system, while chasing a group of pirates in the system's asteroid belt. When Ordo used a thermal generator to melt the frozen methane covering the asteroid, the Yorick Stroha and Ordo's worlds woke up. The asteroid began to spin quickly and then proceed to fire plasma at the Mandalorians. The extragalactic weaponry was able to melt through the Mandalorian armor like wax. The attack on the Mandalorians became their first contact with the known galaxy. Their probe fled soon after the brief battle with Ordo's Mandalorians. Ordo followed in hot pursuit, but was unable to keep up with the probe. The Mandalorians were able to track the probe's hyperspace wake in the edge of the galaxy, where the Neo-Crusaders turned back, apparently thinking that the mysterious ship was going on a suicide run into the great void outside the galaxy. Also, in this general time frame, a female shaper arrived in the galaxy in suspended animation, crashing unlured and surviving there for several decades, interacting with locals who believed her to be a demon. Between 229 and 89 BBY, the living planet Zunama Seacock, a seed of Yuuzhan travelled in Gardiad's Rift. In 33 BBY, a Yuuzhan Vong was captured and ended up in Cog Hive 7, a prison colony wherein deadly gladiatorial matches regularly took place between inmates. The Yuuzhan Vong, who had already killed 2 fellow inmates in transit to the colony, quickly emerged as the station's most recent champion. For 6 months, the warriors systematically defeated every opponent pitted against the Yuuzhan Vong, until the champion was matched with Sith Lord Darth Maul, who was on an undercover mission on Cog Hive 7. After a brutal fight, Maul killed the warrior. As Yuuzhan Vong had only spoken in the species' native language, the colony's systems had failed to classify his species, point of origin, or even gender, although some of the guards suspected that the individual was female. In 32 BBY, at the time of the invasion of Naboo, an advance force of Yuuzhan Vong, termed Far Outsiders by the planet's inhabitants, discovered Sonama, and noting the similarity to Yuuzhan, though not drawing the connection, attempted to colonize it. However, when the Yuuzhan Vong attempted to settle, Tsunama Sikok's biosphere killed off the Yuuzhan Vong flora and fauna, provoking them. Although Sikok attempted to negotiate with them, they began to assault upon the planet. After 2 years of costly fighting, the assault was called off, and the survival of the Jedi Knight Vigeri, who convinced the Yuuzhan Vong to leave on the condition that she would travel with them. The Galactic Republic received only shadowy news at the attack, even after Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Padawan Anakin Skywalker went to investigate Vigeri's disappearance. All that they discovered was that an unknown race of biotech-based aliens from a distant place, and armed with weapons that the planet's inhabitants had never seen before, had attacked the world. In 29 BBY, after learning of Tsunama Zakok, Supreme Warlord Quarel's determination to invade began to waver. The Yuuzhan Vong soon learned that Tsunama Zakok was no longer in its original system, and there was no evidence that it had been destroyed. Worried about the threat presented by the powerful planetary entity, he announced to his people that it would be best to move on to another galaxy. However, Shimira Yamani, under the influence of Unimi and the support of some of the more aggressive domains, launched a coup, murdered Quarel, and took his place, ensuring that the invasion would go forth as planned, but it would still be some time before they were ready. Information of the Yuuzhan Vong activity within the galaxy for the next few decades is scarce. It is known that by 27 BBY, at the start of the outbound flight project, Palpatine had somehow gained knowledge of the incoming Yuuzhan Vong fleet, though he planned to withhold it from the Republic until after his new order would be instituted. At least one of his subordinates, Kinman Doriana, was informed. However, the distant threat of invasion was also part of the reason Palpatine ordered the destruction of the outbound flight in order to prevent its occupants from falling into the hands of the Yuuzhan Vong, and also to eliminate 6 Jedi Masters and 12 Jedi Knights. Following the end of the Clone Wars, Emperor Palpatine let out hints of the Yuuzhan Vong to the public. One of his official justifications for maintaining the Imperial Navy even after the war had ended was to ward off the threat of the extragalactic invasion. It was around this time that another small advance force of Yuuzhan Vong engaged the Chiss Expansionary Defense Force at the edge of the Chiss Ascendancy. Although the Chiss Admiral Arlini managed to defeat them, the Yuuzhan Vong fought much better than the Chiss had believed, which such a small fleet was capable of. The appearance of the outbound flight shortly afterwards led the CEDF High Command to wonder if the invaders and the Republic were allies. Sometime between 27 BBY and 22 ABY, it was speculated by some Chiss that the Yuuzhan Vong had made a pact with the Vigeri against the Chiss. Yuuzhan Vong scouts returned dozens of kidnapped sentients to the fleet from the galaxy. Among them were humans, Serpine and Tals. They were interrogated and experimented upon. with many dying and others being sacrificed. Those who survived, such as the Geri, were awarded as familiars. Around 25 BBY, 3 years before the Clone Wars, the Yuuzhan Vong also established a small outpost on the planet Bemil. After the formation of the Galactic Empire, Imperial scientists established a base on the same planet, suggesting that Palpatine might have had a direct contact with the invaders. However, the remains of the Yuuzhan Vong occupying the outpost went undisturbed until their discovery shortly into the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. It is also known that Yuuzhan Vong scouts were active in the galaxy during the Clone Wars. Sometime between being dispatched to the unknown regions in 3 ABY at the time of the Battle of Hoth and his return in 9 ABY, now Grand Admiral Thrawn apparently encountered the Yuuzhan Vong advance force hiding in the unknown regions. The threat of the advancing invaders was one of his primary motivations for trying to reunify the Empire, as he felt that the Empire stood a much better chance against the Vong than did the New Republic. The Yuuzhan Vong advance scouts themselves shared that sentiment. After the formation of the Imperial Interim Council in 11 ABY, following the final death of the reborn Emperor Palpatine, Yuuzhan Vong Executor Nom Anor was tasked to infiltrate the council. He did so and manipulated its leader, Sandel Carivus, arranging the deaths of many councillors and furthering the internal strife between the leaders of the fracturing empire. Meanwhile, the Yuuzhan Vong also began meddling in the high politics of the Siuruai Imperium. They installed one of their own agents, Athena, in an high-ranking military position and manipulated the rise of the power of the Kiramkak, with the goal of eventually using the Shiruvi to create confusion and disorder during the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. In 24 ABY, Yuuzhan Vong agent Yuminkar infiltrated the Exgol Society, stationing himself as the Exgol 4 base on Belkadin, located along the Victor Prime. In 25 ABY, Yuuzhan Vong Executor Non Anor struck a deal with Boba Fett to have him and a select group of Mandalorian aid the invasion force. Fett realized that openly resisting the Yuuzhan Vong would result in the enslaving of Mandalore, so he agreed. He secretly carried out a plan to aid the New Republic by allowing the New Republic personnel to escape with information from doomed worlds. This resulted in escape of the Jedi Knight Kuberet on the world of New Holga. On the world of Rumon Ol, Yuuzhan Vong Executor Nom Anur, disguised as the leader of the Red Knights of Life, stirred up a war between Rum-Mon-Ul and its neighboring planet, Ozarium. He was also responsible for infecting Mara Jade Skywalker and 100 other diplomats with a deadly Yuuzhan Vong disease. As a result, the New Republic did not take notice when the first of the invasion force, the Praetorate Vong, made planetfall on the distant world of Helskav 4 and also brought down Serpendal's moon upon the planet, killing millions of beings, including the famous Wookiee Chewbacca, and leaving the planet itself in pieces. The Yuuzhan Vong also encountered the Jedi, whom they started to consider the worst of a galaxy full of infidels. Due to a small part of the Jedi's ability to control a supernatural force, the Yuuzhan Vong had been denied. The Praetorate Vong were eventually defeated by the Galactic heroes like Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Leia Organa Solo, and Lando Calrissian. The main Yuuzhan Vong fleet arrived soon after though, and had in short order conquered many of the worlds in their invasion corridor. Bimiel, Dantooine, Dubrillion, and Obrosky were among the many worlds captured, while Ithor was consumed by firestorms and rendered uninhabitable. Sheltering the refugees from planets in the invasion corridor quickly became such a problem that the New Republic government could no longer ignore the threat of the Yuuzhan Vong. The political leadership was ineffectual in countering the invaders, though, and initially tried to blame the Jedi for starting the conflict with the aliens. The Yuuzhan Vong, considering the Jedi their worst enemies, capitalized on this by luring natives of the galaxy into turning in Jedi with the promise that they would be spared from the invasion. The Peace Brigade appeared as the organization of such individuals. The Yuuzhan Vong also struck a deal with the Hutts that allowed them to pass through Hutt space unmolested. But Hutts secretly played both sides by passing information on Yuuzhan Vong fleet movements on to the New Republic. In return, the Yuuzhan Vong ruthlessly conquered their worlds. In any case, moving through the Hutt space allowed the invaders to launch an attack against Vendor on the far side of the galactic core. However, they suffered heavy losses in the Battle of Fondor when Han Solo's cousin, Thraken Sal Solo, fired Centerpoint Station against them, destroying much of the defending Hapan fleet too. Following the conquest of Doro, War Master Shavonna offered the New Republic a ceasefire if they turned over every single Jedi in the galaxy. The Jedi became hated as never before, with several planetary governments collaborating with the Yuuzhan Vong in hunting them down, and even resulting in the New Republic temporarily issuing an arrest warrant for Jedi Masters Luke and Mara Jade Solo. The Peace Brigade also launched an attack on the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4 in an unsuccessful attempt to capture the children being trained there. The Yuuzhan Vong themselves arrived shortly after, though, complicating the situation for the few Jedi remaining on the moon. The Yuuzhan Vong captured the Jedi trainee Thari Vila and started shaping her like the rest of their biological creations. However, before the experiment was completed, she was rescued by her best friend Anakin Solo with the help of the shamed Yuuzhan Vong, Puwa Rapung, and redeeming the shamed ones in the process. As a result, a heretical movement that worshipped the Jedi as saviors gained popularity among the shamed ones, later led by Num Anur. Despite the efforts of the ruling castes to exterminate it, a short while later the Yuuzhan Vong broke the ceasefire by launching a surprise attack on Yagdol. A single New Republic soldier tries to hide from the Yuuzhan Vong while the New Republic crumbles under the relentless invasion. 2 years into the war, the Yuuzhan Vong unleashed a new biological creation, the Voxian, for the purpose of hunting down the Jedi. In response, Anakin Solo formed an all-Jedi strike with the intent of hunting down the Voxian Queen, for which the Yuuzhan Vong cloned all other Voxian. The mission was a success, but came at a cost of the lives of nearly half the team, including Anakin Solo himself, and also left his brother, Jacen Solo, captured by the Yuuzhan Vong. Meanwhile, the Yuuzhan Vong launched an immense attack on Coruscant, conquering the capital of the New Republic and killing Chief of State Brosk Hilya. Following that, they renamed the planet Yuuzhan Tar and started vogue-forming the planet in the image of their long-lost homeworld. The Vong forming of Coruscant was sabotaged by Jacen Solo before he escaped from captivity with the aid of Vergri. The Yuuzhan Vong began to also suffer from the internal problems, as the stresses of maintaining an empire began to tax their resources. The new republic, having moved its capital to Dak, elected Kal Omas to replace Ilya, who also created the High Council, which would coordinate the Jedi's role in the war. At the same time, the Jedi also found out about the NRI's secret project to create Alpha Red, a biological weapon that would wipe out the Yuuzhan Vong and all of their creations. The Jedi were unable to convince Kal Omas to ignore the weapon as a viable option for countering the invaders, but the rogue Jedi Knight Vagiri saved them the trouble by destroying the project herself. However, the incident strained the relationships between the Jedi and the New Republic. Forced to pursue conventional warfare while the Alpha Red team started from scratch, the New Republic hatched a plan to lure the Yuuzhan Vong into a trap in the deep core centered around the moon Ibak 9. Using Jedi Knight Jania Solo as bait, the trap was successfully sprung in the Yuuzhan Vong fleet, destroying it. On Ibak 9, War Master Savong La himself was slain by Jina Solo, and Vagiri sacrificed herself to eliminate the rest of the Yuuzhan Vong troops that had landed on the moon. Omas, using the political clout and fearing that the Senate would try to hijack control of the war, drafted a new constitution which stripped the Senate of executive power, turning the new republic into the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances. After the victory, Luke Skywalker put together a team to follow up on Vagiri's information about the living planet of Zanama Zekok. They traveled into the unknown regions, receiving help from both the Imperial Remnant and the Chiss, though only after having provided a service in return. Eventually they found the living planet and entered negotiations in an attempt to convince it to help end the war. Meanwhile, Executor Nom Anur, disgraced for his role in the disaster of Ibak 9, disguised himself as the prophet Yusha and began stirring up heresy on Yuuzhan, formerly Coruscant. He heard about Zunama Zekok and succeeded in putting together a mission to the living planet, consisting of himself, still in disguise, the Shaper Nim Yim, and Yuuzhan Vong priest Haror, and the two Jedi Knights, Jiri Villa and Koran Horn. The five made it to Zanama Zakok, where Num Anor showed his hand and killed Nim Yim and pushed Harar over a cliff before trying to sabotage the planet's hyperdrive. The two Jedi were unsuccessful in undoing his sabotage or preventing him from escaping the planet. But Zunama Zakok appeared to know what to do as it launched itself into hyperspace and traveled to Yuuzhan, taking up orbit around the same star as the former capital of the galaxy. During this time, the Galactic Alliance had prepared to make a push for Yuuzhan and take the planet back, and hopefully also break the Yuuzhan Vong's ability to wage war by taking out the Supreme Overlord. In the end, Supreme Overlord Shimra was revealed to be nothing but a puppet by the real leader of the Yuuzhan Vong, the Force-sensitive, shamed one, Onnimi. Shimra was killed by Luke Skywalker, and Onnimi was later killed by Jacen Solo. during the Second Battle of Coruscant. Nazcoka, last successor as War Master, became de facto supreme overlord and ordered the remaining Yuuzhan Vong warriors to surrender. One of the terms of the Yuuzhan Vong surrender was also that they help rebuild Coruscant into as suitable as the capital of the Galactic Alliance. The Galactic Alliance settled on Denum while construction went on, and eventually back to Coruscant after the rebuilding was complete. Zunama Zekok also revealed itself as the seed of the long-dead original Yuuzhan Vong homeworld. After the end of the war, the remaining Yuuzhan Vong were recalled from across the galaxy to Zunama. Zunama Zekok, which, with its new Yuuzhan Vong population, then disappeared back into the unknown regions, so that the Yuuzhan Vong could live in peace and renew their relationship with Zakok. Among other things, they planned to attempt to abolish their caste system and had already eliminated the posts of War Master and Supreme Overlord, though Choka seemed to remain the de facto leader of the species. The Bothans, however, were unforgiving for the death of Filya and continued to uphold their declared state of Arcree genocide against the Yuuzhan Vong, sending their ships into the unknown regions to hunt for Zonama. By 36 ABY, their efforts had been somewhat foiled by the Galactic Alliance, which had impounded the ship detailed for the expedition. The Yuuzhan Vong War was possibly the most devastating crisis the galaxy had faced. The costs in lives were staggering. The number of deaths over the known galaxy were estimated to be about 300 trillion centients. The Galactic Alliance gradually finished rebuilding itself a few years later, but it never would be the same as the pre-invasion New Republic. Sometime after 41 ABY, as part of a move to improve relations between the Yuuzhan Vong and the rest of the galaxy, the Galactic Alliance's new Jedi Order permitted Yuuzhan Vong Shapers, headed by Master Shaper Ni Rin, to use a desolate portion of Ossus, one of the Order's most ancient strongholds, as a test site. The intent of those who championed the project, such as Jedi Master Cole Skywalker, a leading member of the Jedi Council, was to see if Vong terraforming methods, such as those that had once terraformed Coruscant into the species' temporary homeworld of Yuuzhan Tar, could restore the barren and devastated world. Though most of the species had left for the unknown regions on Zunama Zekok, enough Shapers remained to start a pilot program on the world. The experiment appeared to work, returning vibrant life to Ossus, and when the Jedi revealed the results to the outside galaxy, other worlds vied for the chance to restore planets the Yuuzhan Vong War had left devastated. Ultimately, 100 planets were chosen for terraforming. Yuuzhan Vong Shapers, accompanied by Jedi, set to work, and at first the results were wondrous to behold. Unfortunately, none had reckoned that the interference by the one Sith, under command of the cult's leader, Darth Krayt, the Sith secretly sabotaged the terraforming process on these worlds. Plants grew deformed and painful bony growths of a kind not seen since the Yuuzhan Vong forcibly took populations as slaves, sprouted from the skins of the inhabitants, killing millions in the process. The Jedi suspected sabotage, but did not know who was responsible. All across the galaxy, however, blame fell upon the Yuuzhan Vong. Far too much animosity still existed against the former invaders for many to believe they had truly given up their ambitions of conquest. The Jedi, however, were certain that the Yuuzhan Vong were innocent and convinced the Galactic Alliance to support Yuuzhan Vong against domestic criticism. This turned out to be too much for the Empire. The signing of the Palean-Garism Treaty, 19 ABY, had brought peace between the Imperial Remnant and the New Republic, and the war against the Yuuzhan Vong had all but united the former rivals. However, the Muff Council still contained many hardliners who sought to restore the Empire to primacy as a dominant galactic power, calling for their retribution and invoking the Treaty of Annexus. They declared war on the Galactic Alliance. The peace that so many had fought and died for in decades past was undone at a stroke, as the Sith had planned. Fearing that what could ultimately happen, the Jedi High Council ordered the creation of the Hidden Temple at the start of hostilities, its location chosen by Nat Skywalker so the Jedi could have a refuge. From the start, the Alliance was handicapped. Its defense of the Yuuzhan Vong had alienated numerous member worlds, whose populations still nursed bitter memories of the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. Many of them refused to support the Galactic Alliance. Suddenly, the Alliance found itself facing a secessionist movement, as well as general war. The Empire used this to its advantage, luring some of the disaffected worlds into the Imperial camp and weakening the Galactic Alliance government. Other worlds, like Haps, declared neutrality. Thus, the war started with the Galactic Empire having all the advantages. Despite this, Emperor Ron Fel himself was less than enthusiastic. He had only reluctantly declared war and thus never threw his full support behind it, even going so far as to prevent his Imperial Knights from participating. It was at this time that things were not going smoothly for the Fel Empire. Despite the Alliance handicap, the Jedi were more than making up for that. Also because Ron Fel refused to let the Imperial Knights enter the war. The Empire didn't have the strength necessary to counter the Jedi. Soon the Sith inserted themselves into the war through Moff Nya Calixte, the ruthless and ambitious director of Imperial intelligence. The Sith approached the Empire and allied themselves with the Imperial cause. When the Sith then declared themselves openly, the Jedi quickly realized that it was they who were responsible for sabotaging the Yuuzhan Vong terraforming projects, though the Order was never able to definitively prove it. As events progressed, even members of the Imperial regime, including Emperor Fel himself, realized the truth that they had been used as pawns in the one Sith's plan for galactic dominance. Sadly, by the time the true motivations of the Sith had been made clear to Emperor Fel, it was far too late to halt the designs already set in motion. The Yuuzhan Vong, upon learning the truth, were at first relieved that it was not the work of their gods, and were then determined to reverse the damage the sabotage had caused. Shaper Ni Rin returned from Ossus to try to discover the Sith method of sabotage, hoping that this knowledge would help discredit the Sith and end the war. After 3 years of bloody warfare, the Galactic Alliance was a spent force, while the Sith only grew in power and strength, even independently manufacturing and fielding their own starfighters. Imperial forces had even retaken Coruscant after more than a century. The Alliance finally surrendered, and its territory was absorbed into the Empire. It is unknown if the Empire made any efforts to exterminate the Yuuzhan Vong. The Emperor called on the Jedi Order to surrender and subject itself to the will of the Empire. Some of them did, becoming the Imperial Knights, but the rest, remaining true to the will of the Force, refused to ally themselves with the Sith and withdrew from Coruscant with their temple on Ossus. The Sith eventually followed the Jedi there. Darth Nal, former Nagi warlord turned Sith, led a brutal attack on Ossus, aided by the Imperial forces led under Moff Rolf-Yang. The massacre at Ossus scattered the Jedi across the galaxy, though the Order was not yet entirely defeated. Ni Rin returned to Ossus the day after with proof that the Sith had been behind the project's sabotage, but unfortunately too late to stop either the war or the massacre. Shortly after, the Sith, determined to rule the galaxy themselves, turned against Emperor Ron Fel and his Imperial Knights. After killing what he later determined to have been a double of the Emperor, Darth Krayt assumed the Imperial throne himself, restoring, for the first time in over a century, the rule of a Sith Lord over most of the galaxy. Though most of the Yuuzhan Vong who accompanied the Jedi in the Ossus project were slain, 3 managed to survive, where they remained beneath the Jedi Temple and guarded the remains of the dead Jedi out of respect for the Jedi Order. Master Shaper Ni Rin had been off-planet investigating why the project had gone wrong, but arrived back on Ossus with her findings too late to stop the war or the massacre. Shortly afterwards, Rin, Regars, and a few Jedi who had returned to the world were hiding from the Imperial patrol under the temple when the patrol's Sith commander ordered the Academy destroyed from orbit. Luckily, thanks to Jedi Master Kakrok, the occupants managed to survive. After some time, it was revealed that a fanatical Yuuzhan Vong named Zonok Kwa had survived the war and had hid in Wayland for over a century before allying with the one Sith to sabotage the Ossus project. 7 years later, he was a part of Darth Malady's plot to overthrow Darth Warlock from the rule of the Empire, as well as put a new, more powerful Dark Lord at the helm. Qua and Malady worked at creating a new weapon that would secure their hold in the galaxy from dissident Sith. For this purpose, Malady and Qua set a trap to capture Cad Skywalker as their test subject. Due to their beliefs, the Yuuzhan Vong were opposed to technology, ranging from simple machines to droids, which they believed were a polluting influence. As such, all examples of their technology consisting of living biots, creatures that were born and bred for their tasks. They preferred the use of such creatures over lifeless machines which lacked any form of spirit. All Yuuzhan Vong technology, whether it be starships, weapons, or simple everyday objects, were entirely biological. They hated droids, machines, electronics, and anything manufactured. This biotechnology was coaxed into growth by the Shapers and seemed to be more resilient when compared to the conventional technology. Notable pieces of technology included the feared Yammosk, which were called War Coordinators due to the fact that they served as biotech battle analysis computer and had the capacity to coordinate Yuuzhan Vong forces into a frightening degree. Through their Phillips, they had managed to create a communication system that rivaled the galactic holonet. Different breeds of such organisms were also capable of producing living light holograms, which the Yuuzhan Vong had mastered for centuries. It was known that their collision avoidance systems were as good as those of the inhabitants of the galaxy. Furthermore, their equivalent of the antenna consisting of spire fibers embedded in the auric coral hole to regions which were sensitive to receiving communications. In addition, they made use of nutrient feeds for various biots, which served as a similar capacity as power lines did for their technological equivalents. Similar to navigation computers, the Yuuzhan Vong vessels possessed navibrains that were required to pilot hyperspace jumps. Their vessels were also required to rearm themselves after combat, with the process noted as being marginally better than those of the technological inhabitants of the galaxy. The Yuuzhan Vong personal weaponry included living serpentine weapons called amphistaffs that were able to alter their form, allowing the user to use them as a spear or whip. Furthermore, they wore Odom's sheer-crick armor that was capable of protecting them from weapon fire as well as lightsaber strikes. The larger coral-shaped craft made use of Yarit core plasma weapons that ate through the hull of enemy ships, while shielding was provided by the gravity manipulating Dovin vessels that generated singularities that were used to protect the craft from enemy weapon fire, and were also capable of stripping the shields of enemy vessels. These organisms were grown independently and later grafted into other organisms in an imperfect symbiosis. In addition, they generated powerful gravity fields that could also create interdiction fields that left living occupants unconscious after being pulled from hyperspace. Larger, more insidious weapons include biological plagues capable of destroying entire worlds. Some plagues were unleashed that left planetary systems barren, incapable of growing food. The primary construction method through which the Yuuzhan Vong created their living vessel was through the use of Yorick coral. This coral-type substance formed the whole and internal anatomy of their vessels. While several other races had mastered bioengineering, the Yuuzhan Vong were one of the few who had developed a mass production of means of creating such organisms. They were capable of growing coral skippers in less than a month's time, which matched the production rate of the Incom Corporation X-Wing, but had the benefit of not producing any waste material from normal industrial techniques. The outer skin of such craft, despite being alive, did not feel anything in the vacuum of space, as the nerves were not exposed to the cold of the void. They were created to lack any nerve endings at such locations. Though the outer hull did not possess any nerve endings, the inner hull did, and any breach led to alarms being raised, thus alerting the Yuuzhan Vong of intruders. Something not commonly known was that the nerves near the Dovin's basiles were compromised due to the creature's gravitic nature. As the Dovin basiles were independently grown, they were nursed separately and later grafted into the host's vessels. However, the symbiosis was not perfect, and the gravitic distortion created by the Dovin's basiles desensitized the nerve clusters that were adjacent to it. Amongst warships or any other vessels, the Yuuzhan Vong compensated this problem by implanting special nerve biots around the Dovine basile in order to create a complete tactile net that would not be confused by the gravitic anomaly. However, certain low-priority ships were not afforded this amenity, and thus created blind spots for the breach action. Inside these ships, much of the system had technological equivalents, such as a central biotic computer like the targeting brain. However, it was sensor systems that were the most different, as instead of any external mounted observatory sensors, the Yuuzhan Vong employed a means of sensing the gravitational distortion of distant objects as a means of scanning. The key interface element within Yuuzhan Vong biots that linked them to their organic ships, the technology, were Cognition Hoods. These organic helmets simply slid on top of an individual's head and were connected by an organic cord linked to the ship itself. Through this contact, a pilot is capable of making a direct interface with the ship and communicating with it. This was the case either with organic pilots and droids, which are capable of processing the data being sent to the hood. On board larger carrier ships, a central cognition hood was used by the ship's commander to deliver commands to the vessel. However, should this hood be severed, then secondary cognition hoods located on smaller craft, such as core skippers, were capable of sending commands from the fighter to the carrier vessel, thus allowing some level of control. By wearing the hood, a pilot was capable of experiencing the memories of the ship they were linked to, thus allowing them to be part of the ship in question. Yuuzhan Vong ships communicated in the Yuuzhan Vong language, which left a language barrier between foreign pilots and the vessel. However, it was possible to implant images and thoughts through the hood to the ship, thus allowing it to be controlled. A much more larger, powerful version of these biots was the Cognition Throne. Some of the more famous technologies were the Amphistaff, the Yorick It, the Dovan Basil, the Nullith, the Grazel, the Oglith Cloaker, the Oglith Mascarer, the Vilip, and the Yemsos. Num Anur, a member of the Intendant caste, whose duties included espionage, he was responsible for half of Yuuzhan Vong's invasion of the galaxy and was one of the new Jedi Order's deadliest enemies. Gave Mara Jade Skywalker a nearly deadly sickness, killed in the liberation of Coruscant. Quarrel, the supreme overlord of the Yuuzhan Vong prior to the invasion, killed by Shimra. Shimra Jamani, the supreme overlord of the Yuuzhan Vong during the invasion, killed by Luke Skywalker. Omni, Shimra's jester and ashamed one. Omnimi was a former master shaper who added Yamusk tissue to his brain, which made him powerful, though it also made him shamed. Seeing a chance of redemption, Omnimi made Shimra an intendant, his puppet, and ruled the throne from behind the scenes, killed by Jason Solo. Nim Yim, a shaper, she arrived to the living world, Zonama Zakok, with Jedi Master Corran Horn, along with Thiri Villa. Num Anor, under the guise of the prophet Yusha and the Yuuzhan Vong priest Harar, where she learned that the peaceful living world Zonuma Zakok is the seed of the original Yuuzhantar, and that her species have gone terribly astray. She was killed by Num Anor. Shedoshe battled Gorin Horn for control of Ithor and lost, although the planet was destroyed anyway. Shavong La, War Master of the Yuuzhan Vong. Shavong La was another of the new Jedi Order's deadliest enemies. He even offered to halt the invasion of the New Republic, but turn over the Jedi. He was hideous, and many organic implants built into himself. Shavong La was killed during the Battle of Ibak. during the duel with Jaina Solo. Harar, a priest of the Yun-Harla, he recognized the threat the Jedi represented early on and consistently advocated for their destruction. He arrived on Zunama Zakok with Nim Yim, where the planet's beauty struck him deeply. He was the first to renounce his species' violent ways in favor of ending the war. Naz Ka, supreme warlord of the Yuuzhan Vong fleet, with Laz's successor as war master. With the death of Shimra and Onimi, Kokha ordered the Yuuzhan Vong to surrender, thus ending the war. He succeeded Shimra and Onimi as leader of the Yuuzhan Vong. Ni Rin, a master shaper of the Shaper caste, ally of the Jedi before, during and after the Sith Imperial War. Sinuk Kwa, a member of the Shaper caste and the one Sith collaborator. Bal Gorsat, a member of Garak Loran's reformed Wraith Squadron in 44 ABY. Gorsat, nicknamed Scout, differed from other Vong in that he was raised by a human family. The Yuuzhan Vong first appeared in Del Rey's 1999 and 2003 book series Star Wars The New Jedi Order. He also went on to appear in several other expanded universe products afterwards. The name Yuuzhan Vong was developed at a French Thai restaurant in New York City called Vong, which several Del Rey employees were patronizing. The Yunnan region was mentioned in a list of teas on a menu that Shelley Shapiro, who was present, was reading the first draft of the name and would eventually be given. The intergalactic invaders was born of Yuuzhan Vong. It is rumored that the Yuuzhan Vong were originally intended to be exiled Sith, but that the idea was changed partway through the series. To round-robin interview published in the New Jedi Order, the Unifying Force, confirms that they were originally planned to be dark side users. Also, according to the interview, the concept of the Yuuzhan Vong's exclusive use of biotechnology came from R.A. Salvatore, and their love of pain was originally confined to Domain Shah, but later authors misunderstood and applied it to the entire species. As discovered by the Jedi during the war, the Yuuzhan Vong, they were apparently absent from the Force. In the book The New Jedi Order, The Unifying Force by James Lacino, the reason for this was given. The Yuuzhan Vong are not absent from the Force. Their entire species has been cut off from it. It is surmised that in the novel that this was implemented by the intelligence of their homeworld, the seed of which would one day become Zanama Zakok, because of their war-mongering and hostile conquering of other species. Yuuzhan Vong culture and religion is heavily influenced by that of Mesoamerican cultures such as the Aztecs. Yuuzhan Vong possess a number of similarities to other species that were introduced within the novels. They share the same fanaticism as the Yvetha and a caste system similar to the Shiru, and the same exclusive use of biotechnology as the Charon. At the celebration of Anaheim in 2015, Dave Filoni and Pablo Hidalgo revealed at their The Untold Clone Wars panel that before the show was cancelled, there had been plans for the Yuuzhan Vong to potentially appear in the Clone Wars, Star Wars The Clone Wars television series. Sketches of the species drawn by Filoni for the show were shown at the panel. The Vong were to be featured in a X-Files-esque episode in which the Yuuzhan Vong aboard their scout ship would perform an abduction trying to assess the strength of the Galactic Republic and what the Jedi were. According to Hidalgo, however, the story would have just implied the origins of the Yuuzhan Vong, and they weren't immune to the Force, to better align George Lucas's description of the Force. While Yuuzhan Vong are no longer considered part of the Star Wars canon and are now classified as part of Star Wars Legends, a similar species known as the Grisk first appeared in Timothy Zahn's 2018 canon novel Thrawn Alliances. Like the Yuuzhan Vong, they were a threat to the Chiss ascendancy, and from whom an invasion into the galaxy would be imminent, mirroring the Yuuzhan Vong War in the New Jedi Order book series. However, the Grisk did not use biotechnology and were not immune to the Force, and originated in the unknown regions instead of extragalactic location. That's the end of the story of the Yuuzhan Vong. Please like and share this video. Also click subscribe in order to be updated on any new content that I may share in the future. Until the next time, may the Force be with you.